Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Morisoli.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
And you're listening to the What Matters podcast, and our mission
to spotlight top RIAs, wealth managers, and investment professionals who are redefining wealth management.
Join us as we dive into their journeys, strategies, and insights.
Whether you're an investor or an inspiring pro, this is for you.
Get ready for impactful conversations on the What Matters podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morisoli.
And I'm Ashley Ward. And today we're thrilled to sit down with someone who has spent nearly 2 decades guiding families and future financial professionals, Kevin Morisoli, CEO and Wealth Management Advisor at Morisoli Wealth Management, affiliated with Northwestern Mutual.
Kevin began his career as an intern in 2007 and has built a thriving practice in Hawaii after getting his start in San Diego and earning not just a master's degree in financial services, but also an impressive list of credentials, CFP, CLU, CHFC, CASL. I can keep going on here. None of them, which I have. That's awesome.
He's a husband and father to 2 boys, a surfer, and a serious endurance athlete who's completed 2 Ironmans. Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
It's a pleasure. I wanted to say you're our first guest from joining us from Hawaii, but I actually think someone already beat you to the punch there. So
yeah,
not cool. I'm going to leave now. Then I thought I was the only one. So in that case,
but it's great to have you joining us all the way from the islands out there. So let's just jump right into the conversation here. We're really curious about your personal and professional journey there, Kevin. Let's rewind to the beginning. You started with Northwestern Mutual as an intern in 2007, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Fantastic. So, with about 20 years in the industry almost, what drew you to the financial services industry in the first place?
Well, actually, it's a funny story because I had almost no desire to work in this industry. I had a college professor, finishing my junior year, going into my senior year, that was like, if there's anything you take out of being in college is do as many internships as you can. And I wanted to be an accountant. So that was like the trajectory I was on. And I was like, you know what? I found this world interesting, at least from an outsider's perspective. And I was like, you know what? At least an internship is kind of like a free trial run at these careers and kind of see what they're like, right? And so, late that summer going into my senior years when I started pursuing some of the interviewing processes. And I interviewed with Wells Fargo advisors, Merrill Lynch, because they all have pretty solid internship programs in San Diego. But the Northwestern was really attractive because I actually got to do it. And most of those other gigs, I was going to be mostly somewhat of an assistant, kind of shadowing somebody. And it wasn't, I don't think, as real life experience as this was, at least what it sounded like. And so, that wasn't the idea, but then I got into it and really liked it. The idea of getting to talk to people all day.
2007, right?
Yeah.
Which
is wild.
There wasn't very far to go down after that.
No.
It was 2008 and 9, but getting started then would have been awesome.
Which is so crazy because Merrill was the other one I really wanted. But it was the least attractive of them because I was really going to be an assistant. But if I did that and then went full time in 2008, like I had done with Northwestern, I would have been one of the first ones on the chopping block during the financial crisis, right? When they let go like thousands of advisors. Most of them were new. I think, I can't remember the statistic. I could be super wrong. So Sophie, don't kill me for saying this, but I want to say like 70% of the advisors they laid off were under 2 years or something wild like that. So I probably would have been one of those casualties, unfortunately, if I'd went that route and I was there. But luckily, I fortuitously chose this one, and then kind of everything kind of fell in line. Right, it was kind of a weird experience.
That's great. And so tell me, you're getting your sea legs, at a time where people in some cases are losing 80 to 90% of their wealth, right? There's millions of foreclosures going on at that time. What brought you to where you're at now? Obviously it was a great time to build, in my opinion, because you have all the prima donnas that rode the market that were just like, oh, I can't make, $500,000 a year and work 20 hours a week.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're immediately out thinking that there's some better opportunity somewhere else. Usually, at least that was what was going on in my industry. But needless to say, what took place after that, and what brought you into the Morisoli group?
Mike, that is a great way to think about it, because most people thought it was a bad time to start. And it actually was, again, not knowing in the moment, but it was great because now, unfortunately, like a lot of our competition was in turmoil. And I didn't have really any investment clients at the time because I was literally just going full time in '08 from the internship. And so I was just getting that security side of the practice going. And it was like, it just opened up so many doors now that people didn't have someone to work with, or they were more open to a different perspective than they had been before because of maybe where they were led or the positions they were in. And, I think it allowed it to be a little easier than maybe, honestly, it might have normally been.
Yeah.
Because of the chaos that was going on.
And when did you start Morisoli Group?
That is only like a year and a half old. Because now, when I started actually though in '07, '08, like we always joked around that the security side at Northwestern was some of a redheaded stepchild. Like we did it, but it wasn't a major focus of our practices then. But now we're seeing some of these ensembles and some of these practices that are doing $2, $3, $4 million at GDC. They've got 5, 6, 7 people on their team. The wealth management component of what we do, is more so at Northwestern, has really blown up the last decade or so. Mainly largely due to our CEO, when I think he started in 2011 or 12, John Slifsky, who was our chief investment officer on the investment side before. So I think having that background coming into being our CEO really helped Northwestern as an organization look at this as a more broad opportunity. It's an awesome insurance institution, but really make some moves on the wealth management side. But the more solely wealth management part is more of a branding mechanism. Because when people see Northwestern, they hear that, they don't identify necessarily me per se, right? It's a larger brand than just myself, especially even here in Hawaii. So we're using that more as like a marketing brand or a marketing arm to identify us more individually. So yeah, it's an umbrella, or like they call it a private client group sometimes in that language of Northwestern Mutual, but it's really just helping us from a marketing perspective.
And let me ask you this: from getting started, just 18 months ago. I know you obviously had a book of business before, but what have you grown your AUM to there?
For this year, or just since I've started at Northwestern?
In total.
Yeah, so about 55 million under management right now. But again, the bulk of that's been really the last like 7 or 8 years, because it was a slow burn early on, even just getting off the ground. But it's really ramped up recently. And that's where our staffing model, some of this more solely wealth management structures come from, because that's how we want to be branded now and be positioned more so in that wealth management space. And our goal is, we want to be moving at about 10 to 15 million of AUM a year now. And more so because I have the capacity with my staff and my team to handle that kind of trajectory. Because that's part of it before was, the staffing models and having the support to grow at the rates and the ways we want to. And I feel now I've got the team, because Frank on my team is a CFP, which is phenomenal. He just passed it last year. He's Series 7 licensed. So it makes this transition into this world where we're trying to grow very rapidly a lot more attainable than maybe it had been just, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And is 55 million total for the whole firm, or is that just you?
Both, because it's just me right now. But again, it's just ramped up so much recently though. Like we've really taken off our capacity has really grown, right? As a team and an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what I was going to ask is, and how many total teammates do you have with Morisoli?
I've got 2 just for myself right now. So the 3 of us total, and Frank is just on the IPS side. The security side is where his support is. Mark is the other gentleman on my team, and he's more of a marketing and just client relations, piece, and some service on the insurance side. But yeah, it's really been this evolution of moving more into this wealth management space, because, it took us, almost 2 decades to get to 55, but I expect us to be at 100 within the next like 2 to 3 years. That's where our headspace is at and kind of where we see this growth going.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about that transition to Hawaii? I mean, you were in San Diego, you moved out. When did you move out to Hawaii? How was that with, transferring your current business? Obviously, now you're in Hawaii, completely different area. How was that
Yeah,
transition? And tell us a little bit about that.
it was, like most of those moving demographically where you have somewhat of a market share and space that you're building. Luckily we had some clients here. We had a pretty big social network, which was part of the genesis of moving in general, but it was still rocky, right? We knew there would be maybe some step back in our revenue and our growth. And that's mainly why, I think some of it did slow down from like, we moved in 2015
Mhm.
and probably that 2015 to 2018 window wasn't like we were starting all over again because, in this industry, that's such a brutal time as those first few years, a handful of years. But there was still like this step back as we were kind of building back up. So if we stayed, yeah, we might have, ended up being in a better position maybe, but this is where we wanted to build our business long term and where we wanted to be as a family. So that was like the major move. But yeah, it was definitely rocky in the beginning for sure.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And you're also a teacher, right? You at the University of Hawaii there. What kind of inspired you to step into the classroom, and tell us a little bit about what courses you're doing, how you're, helping the next generation of potential financial advisors and what you're doing there.
Same kind of thing with Northwestern, where like I had finished getting my master's in 2018, just happened to be mentioning it to a client. And she was like, the University of Hawaii has a West Oahu campus because it's kind of a trek going from West Oahu to where the university's at. So they built like a campus in between so students wouldn't have to drive an hour and a half plus to get to school and back and forth if they're living at home, right? And so she was part of the accounting department that was growing out the West Oahu campus. And I had, again, some accounting background in college and just the finance component. Asked if I was open to teaching just like an accounting 101 course. And that was in the fall of 2019, which is funny going into then COVID in the spring of 2020. Like I just started doing this. And then now after 3 years of doing that, let me think here. Yeah, in 2022 though, they started offering CFP courses at the West Oahu campus. And so they moved me to that. They call it the CFP track. So it's part of the finance department, the accounting department. So it's to prepare students when they're done with school to be able to sit for the CFP if they'd like to. So they just rotate me on a retirement planning course and an estate planning course, just kind of bounce me back and forth depending on like enrollment and stuff like that. But just kind of fun, and I liked it. It was just, especially now that it's these courses that they moved me to the CFP, it's all remote, so I don't have to go there anymore. Was a huge relief because driving there originally was not the best because I don't live super close either. But yeah, so it's been a fun transition, kind of working through that as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I think with growing out your team, is that potentially something you see, finding some potential new graduates that you could bring in as interns or build your team with in the future?
I've referred some to like Northwestern as a whole. They do have some suitability, like compliance issues with like having students be recruited while there are students. Once they're done, technically I could. And we've run into a few good candidates, nothing that's fallen into line yet. And part of it too, with it being remote though, we get a lot of outer island students. So some that are on Maui or Kauai or Big Island. So if I've got a class size, let's say the enrollment's like 18, almost half will be outer island and won't be on Oahu, which is interesting as well. But and some of them too, like aren't always specifically not always going the CFP or finance route. They may be taking the retirement planning course just because they want to learn more about retirement planning.
Yeah.
So it's a little hit or miss necessarily on the quality per se, or maybe what they're going to pursue professionally. But I definitely keep my eye out because there's been a few that have been impressive, and the stars haven't aligned yet. But that's funny you mentioned that, Ashley, because that's been something I've keep a pulse on for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things we talk to a lot of the guests on the show, just the next generation of advisors. I know we had mentioned this previously, Mike, but what it's like 50% in the next 10 years of advisors will be retiring. And so
yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
We've noticed how there's even that age gap between, the ages of, Mike, what was it? There's
I think it was that age gap of 40 to 60s.
40, 60, not many advisors.
Yeah.
And then, where's those next advisors going to come in for when that 50% retire? Who's going to take over their clients?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's a great point. It
yeah,
really is.
so I mean, I think it's a great space to get into if anyone's just graduating or anything.
Yeah.
So in the next, where do you see then your practice in the next 3 to 5 years, Kevin? Any big ambitions, goals that you'd like to share with us and our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, because we're doing about like 700,000 or so of gross revenue as an organization. That's between our insurance production and we're bringing on the security side. Um, Same thing. We're trying to get over that $1 million figure like as quick as possible. Our goal this year is 850. Hopefully, be there in the next couple of years. Because we do have a healthy balance of risk product solutions and the IPS side, the AUM side. Um, but on in our world, as you guys probably know, right, it's just the AUM side has a much more upward trajectory overall. And
Yeah.
as we're gathering more and moving up our grid rate and all that stuff, so our revenue goals are very aggressive, but also just our AUM as well. We've seen it just really take off these last few years. So our big focus is getting to 100 million within the next 3. So closing that like 45 million ish gap. But again, that's only 15 million a year on an average basis, not any market growth or anything like that. That's just sure new AUM coming in.
And do you guys have or is your business just coming in word of mouth, or are you guys doing any sort of marketing?
That's Mike. That's the funny thing is like we really haven't done much yet. That's part of the Morisoli branding thing was like we've done University of Hawaii out here, right? It's kind of like our professional sports. Everyone's just rampant fans, and so we've done some like commercials kind of stuff with the baseball team, the football team, but we kind of felt that lack of originality because of the way we have to do it with Northwestern. So we feel like hopefully the Morisoli Wealth Management brand will give a better like label to who we are and what we are doing. But no, most of it's just word of mouth, 100%. And that's one of the more compelling elements of Northwestern's program. That's all I can speak to, right? I'm sure other firms do a fantastic job, but I know they really trained us well in getting comfortable with the referral word of mouth kind of component of building your business through new client acquisition in that way. And at this stage, luckily, working that pavement for so long is really paying off dividends where we're just getting a lot more call-ins or introductions to parents and stuff like that. And I think that's part of why the AUM's picked up so much is we're getting a lot more of those parental introductions where they're retiring. And now you're moving into cases that are like the high hundreds or 7-figure range and is moving that needle a lot quicker rather than where we get those smaller rollovers, which are fine, which 100 here, 150 there, 200. And we would do those all day long, but we're starting to see a lot more of those introductions happening.
And let me ask you this: are you guys only hiring if they're out of college, or are you taking individuals that are even out of high school at this point? With the lack of people that have had interest in this space. Is that something that you guys would be opposed to, or have you done before?
My understanding is it's not a requirement to have a college degree or a finished. Right. I think it's one of their high degrees of qualification, but I don't think it's mandatory from my understanding. And that's why I think like the whole internship platform is attractive because it allows you to kind of get your foot in the door and really, I always talk about that. Like, I don't know if I would have done this well being thrown into it full time, like into the fire right out of college, because it really gives you this slow burn and ability to build into your comfort. So, like calling people the first time is terrifying. Asking for referrals is terrifying. So it allows you to work those kinks out in a way that is more organic and smooth and slow than it being dependent right out of the gates being full time.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious too, with you working at a university, and I know you're teaching accounting and a retirement course, but and I think you said accounting 101, so it might not obviously be the people, you're not probably working with like those who are about to graduate, but I'm not sure if you're aware of like what are the majors that you see right now, at least at your university, that finance majors that a lot of people are going into? Are we seeing accounting? Are we seeing insurance? Like what field is kind of the trend right now for these newly graduates?
I feel like I don't know if I have a great pulse on that, but I've noticed like an uptick over the years in the finance courses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is like a larger movement in that direction. and I'm not sure. I can't tell. I'm always intrigued sometimes in talking to students like why that is, and I think a lot of it is just like good and bad, the chaos we've experienced over the last handful of years since kind of COVID, and how the market's been moved, and I think the interest is more dynamic when things are chaotic in a sense, because I think there's just a lot more news and intrigue about what's going on and why these things might be happening. So I think that might
Yeah.
be driving a little bit more interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's my question, I guess, because it's like you can graduate in this, but half the time I feel like graduates go into a completely different field than what your major is. Right. Um,
No, couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's kind of funny
yeah,
how that happens.
exactly. It's like you have to pick a major and you barely know how to tie your shoes. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
how have you seen the industry evolve since you started back in 2007? I mean, there's been so many shifts with the market, but then also
Oh my gosh.
technology, the introduction of
Yeah.
AI. What are your thoughts on that, and what are you kind of paying attention to right now?
I mean, Ashley, that's such a great point, because from when I started to now, it's been such an insane, it feels like technological leap,
Mhm.
just in like a short period of time. They talk about that stuff where it takes like so long to get to one point, but once you do, then you see these exponential
Right,
jumps. And, I feel like the early phase was like maybe this robo advisor, like independent investing for individuals, and moving to like a fee compression, you know, industry. But I don't know if I honestly still don't feel like that's an issue as much, right, as I thought it might be. Because I feel like when people sense the value in the fee, then they don't mind paying for it as long as they understand and know what they're getting for it. And if anything, too, that sometimes we'll use as a competitive advantage that, like, yeah, you're not paying much over here, but you also don't get anything. You're trying to navigate your own philosophical investment decisions on your own, rebalancing. Am I putting money into guitar? Like all these other mechanisms around the investment and financial planning element. And we always talk about bandwidth, where it's like there's just so much information out there, so much going on all the time. Do you want to spend your time doing this stuff, right? Is this where you want to be at, 7 p.m. at night, beer, glass of wine, you know, thumbing through investment, periodicals and articles? It's like, no way. So I don't, I feel like I thought that was gonna be a bigger issue. And, even further into this, I almost don't know. I almost know if people, they even enjoy that way of figuring this. I feel like they like having someone to talk to. Like they can
right.
call my cell phone, right? And or I can let them know like, hey, I'm not available now, but I can call you in 2 hours. Like it's not some 1-800 number and all this stuff too. And I noticed too, they really get to know your staff well. That's another interesting part, is like just that organic environment of like comfort. They know everybody they're working with, and who they're talking to, or they've met us or and seen us before. Um, and I feel like another, sorry to go off another, start going too much onto
Go
this,
for it.
but like I feel like as well that the social media component has also made it more confusing for people, because they see all these posts and things that people put up, and I think it's made it harder for them to understand or ascertain, like, is this, I get set. I mean, I'm actually not a person on social media, but people tell me stuff and they'll be like, hey, I read this. Is this true? I'm like, well, that really depends, because that's a pretty broad blanket statement they said, or how they're kind of describing things. And I think
Yeah.
the funnier ones is when you see them, they'll tell me like, oh, so and so's like, there's some Instagram influencers, they have a Ferrari and like, hey, you can write this off through your business, that kind of stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, technically you might be able to, but I don't know if that's really the spirit of what those tax laws are for. Um, that kind of, it's so interesting to me. It's almost feel like it drives more need for us than it is like, driving independence.
No,
Um,
I think you made a great point there, because I was actually, while you were talking, starting to think about that, and I was thinking, now maybe, people with social media and everything going on, it just, the financial awareness, everyone's so much more aware of everything with finances, the market. They scroll through social media and they see people talking about this stock and that stock. Maybe they don't know how to necessarily go about it, but there's just more of that awareness to really start care about your finances, look into a wealth manager, figure
yeah,
out how to grow your wealth. So in a way, I mean, do you think it's potentially brought more clients to the industry?
I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's the whole point, is like the awareness is there. There's just so much
Mhm.
out there, but at the same time, it's so overwhelming to most that it's like, I don't even know where to
Yeah.
start. I don't know what questions to ask, if this is even a smart thing for me to do.
Mhm.
There's just so many more dynamics to it, good and bad, that I feel like, I was joking around like that. I feel like that's where we are in this space. It's like we're financial therapists. It's not always that like we have these earth shattering strategies or ideas. It's more so being able to talk through stuff with people in a logical fashion where it's like, no, this is the way, you had it right. Don't steer from this. You're on the right track. And they're not in their own head so much about it because we can talk about it together. Because it's through these chaotic times like this where I feel like we're also the most valuable. That's where people want to hear from us the most. And it's not fearing the downturns, it's being able to just navigate like, this doesn't matter. Remember, this is why we're on this plan or this star trajectory. These things will happen, or they're cash deployment moments, and elements like that where it's just reinforcing the philosophies that we've always carried together as as we're working with them as a team. And I think that's where it's also supportive, because like when they're doing it through Schwab and Robin, they're on their own. It's like they're just seeing red everywhere. It's a bloodbath,
Right.
and they're just freaking out.
Oh yeah.
So
No, absolutely. Well, Kevin, I think before we wrap up here today, I have one final question for you. As someone who teaches, advises, leads, sounds like you really live a passionate life. What kind of legacy are you hoping to leave behind, both professionally and personally?
wow, that's a
What
loaded
a
question,
question.
Ash. I
You
don't
can
even
focus
know
on your
actually.
professional.
How much time do we have? No,
At least
that
with the community there in Hawaii and what you're doing.
that's like what also drew us here was the intimacy of like the Hawaiian people. Because I mean, I'm obviously not Hawaiian, and part of that was just like from a personal side first, like where we wanted to be and how we wanted to be seen in the business community, in our personal lives, and that overlap. Um, but the legacy part, from that moment as well, like does make me excited that, I have kids that potentially could take this over, right? All this hard work could be something that if they enjoy this business or this industry that they can get into. Not to get too much of a tangent on this, but what I find so intriguing now with just like how big a lot of these practices are getting is the buyout components of some of these are really getting interesting to me, because it's how they're going to be financed. And it seems like there's more clarity on that, but some of them are getting so large that the numbers are getting big on these buyout pieces. On you're talking about the legacy side there as well, and making sure that like it'll transition on. And that's part of what I've always been conflicted about is, we're gathering clients across all ages, and there'll be a point where I'll be in my 60s, but we're going to have a cohort that are still coming up, and making sure that they're still taken care of properly, and that's a smooth transition, with their comfort as well, and they're not just thrown into an advisor situation that they're not super happy with, and some of those factors, that it's a really cohesive transition when it does happen as well. But I feel like it's such a tough one to think about and figure out, because of just how much has changed this industry just in the brief time I've been here.
Yeah.
What it look like in another 20 years or so.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, at this rate, in the next, we might have some robots being advisors. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you on the show, from your path from intern to being an educator to where you are now. It's really inspiring. So we really appreciate what you're doing for everyone in the industry and in Hawaii.
No, I appreciate that. This has been fantastic. Again, thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully somebody out there's learning something and can take some passion out of this and get going, get fired up.
Yeah, we look forward to getting it aired. And, again, thank you so much. I enjoyed our first conversation with you, and I enjoyed the podcast with you, and, we'll stay in touch.
And to all our listeners,
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the What Matters podcast. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations ahead. Until next time, take care.